You're here. Welcome to the Masterminding Success podcast. They say if you want to be successful in business and in life, then surround yourself with successful people. So pull up a seat. The mastermind is about to begin.
Hey, glad you could join us for another episode of the Masterminding Success podcast. We're your hosts, Keith Wheeler
and Nuria Corby.
And what are we talking about today, Nuria?
Today is another great topic, and it's do what you know. So what do we mean by do what you know?
Yeah, I mean, there are positives and negatives to quote doing what you know. When it comes to writing, one of the first things I tell people when they say, I don't know what to create, whether it's a notebook or if it's something they're writing, I always say the easiest thing to start with is doing what you know, doing what you're familiar with, because especially if you're writing, I find that if you know something inside and out, then you know like the inside lingo, and that's something that can make your book stand out compared to those people who don't. And again, I say writing because obviously I write a lot, but even with no content, low content books, if you're doing puzzle books or just quote just a notebook, having the cover, bring out points of whatever your niche is that others don't, because they're not as familiar with it as you are. And one of the examples I always use is my youngest daughter was really big into softball, and so one thing is what most people would call a home run, in softball they call a dinger. So having if you know that, then having a notebook and on the cover it shows a picture of someone hitting a home run, but it says dinger, that's something that's going to speak to them, that they can understand and relate to, compared to just somebody else who just shows a picture.
Yeah, I think in a way it applies to any business. Do what you know, because it's what you are good at, really,
right.
Hopefully. And in writing, it's obviously write about what you know. That's quite obvious. And you said yourself just now, low content is no different. And I keep saying that to people, because normally people ask me, oh, can you give me a good niche? Because people kind of assume that the niche is so important when you are creating a low content book. And it is important, but more important than that is really your book and how good it is, and whether it helps other people, whether they like it. And if you create a book in a niche or in a topic that you're far more likely to have a bestseller than if you're creating a book about something you don't know.
Right.
I see that a lot with coloring books, for example. Everybody is making coloring books these days. And a lot of people don't really know what people who buy coloring books are looking for.
Right.
Coloring is a really, I don't know what to call it, but it's a hobby that's where people are very particular about their books and the pages that they're coloring. Right. And unless you know what people actually want from a coloring book, you're going to make a book that people are not going to like, and they're going to leave bad reviews. And especially now with AI, there's a lot of coloring books coming out that are not really suitable for coloring. But if you don't know that, if you have never colored a book before, if you're not a great, if that's not your hobby, then you probably don't know what's required. You're making a book and you think it's okay, but it's not. And this is why I always say to people who make low content books, choose a niche where you know something about, because that is really going to give you a step up above everybody else. I mean, it makes sense. But even so, a lot of people don't do that. They rather, and really it's so easy to make a book in something that we know. You can think of anything, any hobby. You might do something in your work that you could create a book about. And that is so much better than looking for a niche where there's low competition and high search volume. I mean, yes, it's nice to have that, but you're not going to find that many niches like that anymore. It's really all about creating a book that people will love and that they will they will recommend to other people, and that's how this all snowballs.
Right.
But yeah, I really think that is one of the things that people don't do enough. They don't create books in topics or in niches that they know. Do you find that? Or
I do. And I think
yeah,
it really comes down to, it's the lowest barrier of entry, you know?
exactly. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do something that you're passionate about and that you know,
Mm,
than trying to research something that you don't. You know, while I am completely, I've done it myself, where, you know, write to market or create to market, where you're looking to see where the market needs something. But especially when you're first starting out and you want to, you know, it's very easy to get deterred in this business. And so the easiest way I found is to kind of set yourself up as much as possible for success. And that
mm,
means finding something that is the lowest barrier of entry. Find something that you're passionate about. And because you're passionate about it, one, you'll know more about it. Two, the time you spend working on it won't feel like work because you're passionate about it, you know, and because it's something, like you said, if it's something that you do, you know, whether it's coloring books or whatever, something that you're also a consumer of, then you have that better insight and you can create something that people actually want,
mhm.
and that they'll use, and they'll come back and buy more. And so, you know, it really comes down to, sometimes people just overthink it,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, they'll watch videos that are on YouTube. I've got them myself, where I show you how to do niche research,
Mm,
and you know, I show you, you know, like you said, you know, low competition, you know, high search volume, and great BSRs and stuff like that. And that's
mm,
great. But especially when you're first starting out, you know, just like you've said numerous times, you know, when you start out making just a simple notebook, you know,
mhm.
and learn the process and everything else.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing about finding a niche, you know, do whatever is the most the most aligned with what you as a consumer enjoy. Because
Yeah.
if you do that, then, like I said, the barrier of entry is a lot lower, and it really comes down to creating a good product. No matter how busy or how, quote, saturated that niche may be, if you create something that stands out, and it's, you know, both the quality of the cover as well as the interior, yeah, you may have to run some ads to get more visibility,
Mm,
but it won't take long before the customers start coming, and they will leave the reviews that kind of make you so you don't have to run ads anymore, or
yeah.
you don't have to spend as much on ads. And it all comes down to, you know, doing what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all start by copying other books. You know, when
Mhm.
when I first started KDP, I looked through Amazon and I thought, oh, let's have a look. You know, what's this book? Oh,
Right.
this looks easy to make. Maybe I can do something like that. And you start copying other books that are on Amazon. When I say copying other books, I didn't copy any books.
Right. Right. Understood.
But you take a niche and you think, I can make a book in that
Right.
niche.
You start mimicking them. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's, obviously that's an easy way to do it, but you're not going to be successful um, just doing that. You're
Right.
obviously evolving all the time, and you're learning how to produce a book and how to create it, and you start learning what people like. And the best way to really create a good product, as you said earlier, is to create a good product in a topic that you know about. And
Right.
the other problem there is that a lot of people say to me, well, I don't know what I'm not good at anything in particular. I don't have any hobbies, or I don't, they just can't think of what they are an expert in, because they think that, oh, you have to be an expert in
Right.
something.
No.
And that is not necessarily the case. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to have more experience than somebody else in the subject. I mean, I can think of one example. I don't know if you know the Mrs. Hinch books. This is
No.
it's an influencer here in the UK who creates books on cleaning the house, on organizing your house, organizing your kitchen, and she's been very successful with that. And there are a lot of books that have come out on that subject. they're all, a lot of them are selling quite well, and it's because they're helpful to people. I mean, I've got the Mrs. Hinch one, I've got a couple of others, and it's quite useful sometimes to just make a plan of attack of how you're going to clean your kitchen, or how you're going to organize your bedroom or your wardrobe or anything like that. And they're books that I'm not an expert in doing my housework, but I kind of know a little bit. So I tend to then make a book. If I were to make that kind of book, I would then see, well, what is helpful to me? What can I bring to the table that has been useful, or that makes my work a little bit quicker? So you start with things like that. And that's not something you have to be an expert in. It's just things that you do every day without even realizing. And that's a good way to start. Think about, if you haven't got any hobbies, think about something that you do every day. Eating, I guess, is the one thing that comes into my mind. I don't know. We should really think about this a little bit to help people. But, you know, if you just associate silly things, shopping, for example, is another one. Maybe you can have like a shopping logbook or something like that. You know, obviously you would take your time in thinking about these things. But that's how it starts. That's all it needs to be. It just needs to be something very simple that you do every day, or that you do quite often, and see if you can create a book around that. So a book that's helpful to other people, obviously, or even helpful to yourself, because if you create something that's helpful for you, then chances are it's helpful to other people as well. And I find that that is the easiest way to find a niche, to be honest. It's to do what you know, to do what you do every day. So that's one way of doing it. But I think I mentioned at the beginning, before we started, you know, you don't necessarily have to do what you know. You can, of course, research and find other subjects. I know you probably do that as well, but I find it quite fun to research other things that I've got an interest in, and then creating books. Do you do that as well?
I do. Yeah. I absolutely love researching, and that's why I've got so many videos on it. But again, yeah, it's something that I find kind of cathartic and just relaxing. But that said, you know, I've also been doing this for years, you know, and so I definitely say, like, especially when you're first starting out, you know, like the topic says, you know, do with what, you know, focus on what you know, and what you're good at, but also, you know, kind of getting to what you were saying on, you know, what you're doing every day. First of all, what you can do is just one day, just write down as you're doing things, you know, regardless of how mundane it is, taking out the trash, whatever it is. And then after that, you can ask your, you know, friends, family, whatever, you know, what are some things that I talk about? Because, you know, there are things you talk about, you don't even realize you talk about it, you know, but people around you, people that love you, know what you talk a lot about. to the point where they might be tired of hearing about it. If you talk about something that the people that love you are tired of hearing about it, that tells me that that's something that you're passionate about. You know, and you may not even realize it. But also another thing you could do is, you know, things that it's not always have to be good. And what I mean by that is, what are some things that maybe you suffer from? You know, my wife suffers from migraines. You know, she has Crohn's disease, you know, things like that. Like because you're on that end, you're again, going back to the, you know, the consumer aspect of things. You would have a need for those type of, you know, log books, or, you know, or if you're a writer, written books, you know, how to deal with migraines, how to, you know, whatever. And of course you'll have to, like we were saying, you'll want to dig a little bit deeper into the niche to get the nuances. You'll want to look at the competitors and see, you know, look at their 1 and 2 star reviews and see what people, what they didn't cover, what aspects are there for the taking, there for you to create in your own book. Also look at their 4s and 5s and see what they're doing right, so you make sure you can consider putting those in yours as well. So again, whether we're talking about writing a book or creating a, you know, no content, low content book, it all again comes down to you. Think of yourself and what affects you on the daily basis. Again, whether it's what you're doing or what you're dealing with. And
Absolutely.
and again, like I said, you'll still have to do some research, to figure out, what kind of cover to do, and what the consumers that are already buying books, what they're looking for. And and we've covered that before on, how to do that. But again, it's, I think the big thing is so many people, they either want the super easy way out, or but most time they just overthink it.
Mm.
They're like, oh, well, no one's going to buy that book. You'd be surprised.
Yeah,
If
that's
it's a book that you think would interest you, as much as we all like to think we're unique, and we are, we're not unique to the point where everything about us nobody's interested in.
yeah.
As crazy and off the wall as it is, I guarantee you there's at least, 100 other people on the planet that are interested in that exact same thing, no matter how obscure it is. Underwater basket weaving, probably. And so, and so, yeah, it's just, again, I think it really comes down to don't overthink it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think what you said earlier made me chuckle because you said, ask your family or your friends and family what you keep talking about.
Yep.
I don't even want to think about that, but there'd be, I don't know, a very miserable book that could be sometimes because we tend to complain a lot. But yeah, I think that is so true because your friends and family know what you're good at as well as
Right.
what you're talking about. So you could ask them. And the other thing you mentioned, which again, I really agree because if you suffer from something and you actually create that book, whether it's a written book or a low content book, the people buying that book would much rather buy that book from you who has that experience than from somebody who's never suffered
Right.
from whatever thing you're writing about. I mean, if I don't know, I've got sinus problems as well. So if I bought a book on, I don't know. I don't know if there's a logbook for sinus, but if there's a book about that, I would much rather buy it from somebody who has actually a knowledge of the condition. And then I know that I'm listening to somebody or I'm reading somebody who has experience in that,
Right.
who knows what they're talking about, who I can relate to, and they would be able to relate to me. And that is a two-way street that you can only have if you're creating a book in something
Right.
and no amount of research can really add that experience, because that is something that takes your book to another level.
Right.
And I do, like you, I do love researching niches that I don't know anything about. And it's amazing how much I've learned since I've
Right.
been doing KDP, because there's so much to explore and so much to learn. And I love that about this side of the business. But of course, the books that are doing better for me are definitely the ones where I write or I create something in a topic that I do know something about. I think that's how it should be as well. It should be, books should be written about something that you know about. Or if you don't know anything about it, you can write it from the perspective of someone who doesn't, who is trying or
Mhm.
who's experimenting. That's another. Then you're sort of relating your experience,
Right.
researching. That's another way to do it. But it's all about connecting it to yourself. What kind of book would I be interested in? If you're interested in creating it, you would probably be interested in reading it. And if you're not, then don't create it.
Right. Right.
Because then it's maybe not something that you should create. I think it helps being passionate about something. And even if you're not passionate about it, as long as you quite like the subject or you're interested in the subject, it's much
Mhm.
better than if you're not interested in it. I can't think of an example right now of a book that I might have wanted to start and then I didn't do it, because I end up looking into the subject and then I start getting interested.
Right. Right. Right.
But I'm sure there are subjects out there where no matter how much I look into them, I probably don't find them that interesting. And then I wouldn't create a book in that. But I think as long as you enjoy it, enjoy creating your books, otherwise
Right.
don't do it. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I think, and I think as consumers, we've probably all dealt with it at some point. You can tell when someone is passionate about their book and they're not, or
Yeah.
they're knowledgeable and they're not. And that goes both written as well as, no content, low content.
Mm.
Nothing irritates me more than spending money on a journal and, you know, so many of the aspects of it, there's so many columns to update or whatever that I never use because it doesn't pertain to me,
Yeah.
you know. And
Mm.
conversely, the same thing with a written book. How many times have you bought a book? Obviously I'm talking nonfiction right now, but you buy a nonfiction book and half the chapters you don't read because it doesn't pertain to you, you
Mm.
know. And so I really think that that knowing it, again, it's like I said before, it's the lowest barrier of entry because you don't have to do as much research because you already know it.
Mhm.
The only research you have to do is basically, you don't have to research the topic, you have to research the competitors at that point, you know. And one thing that you mentioned earlier was about mimicking, and
Mm.
people do that quite frequently, and they do it
Mm.
both with written work as well as no content, low content work. And they're like, well, I don't understand, this book is selling, it's got a great BSR, and I created basically the same book and I'm not getting any sales. Well, no, you're not, because that other book already exists.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a book that's already been out there for 2 years, it's got hundreds of reviews, 4.8, whatever reviews, and it's got a great BSR, Amazon's going to keep pushing that one over
Mm.
yours. And as a consumer, if I'm going to go and I'm going to look and I'm going to search up whatever the topic is, and I see one that's got hundreds of reviews and I see this new one, which one am I
Yeah.
going to pick? I'm
Mhm.
always going to go to the one that's got more social proof, And so you don't want to mimic. You use your competitors as a gauge as to what the consumers are looking for. That's it. That's all you use it for. So, if you're doing a logbook, you can, look at the look inside or order the book or whatever, see what options are in there. Again, look at the reviews, see what people are, one of the 1-star reviews might be,
Mm.
I didn't use half these, columns. Well,
Mm.
great. That's a good thing to know. Which ones didn't you use? Ideally, and or I really loved this part. And again, you take what's already out there and make it better.
Yeah.
And that's the only, like, if you're doing what that's really the only part of research you have to do,
Yeah.
is how to make it for what the customers are looking for.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head when you said you have to make it unique. That means
Right.
it has to be different to the original one. It needs to, you either need to add something or you need to approach it from a different angle, but it has to be a different book, because creating the same one and saying, well, it's just as good as this one,
Right.
it's just not going to work, because that one is already out there, has the traction, and you're not offering anything different to that book. So people, like you said, they're going to buy the existing book.
Right.
But you can always think outside the box and think, well, you can look on Amazon. I mean, I get inspiration on Amazon all the time. I look at the
Absolutely.
top 100 books, I see what's out there, and if I like the sound of something, yes, I will create a book like that, but I don't copy it. I'll just get inspired by it, and then I add my own, either my own feeling to it, or I add something, or I add a twist to it, but I change it in some way so that it's not the same one, and that
Right.
hopefully when people look at it, they wouldn't even compare the two, because they're two different books. So you have to think about it that way. You have to make them unique. And doing what you know and making that unique, that's the secret, really, I think. Because if you can combine your knowledge and your experience with something that might not already be out there, or where there's something different about it, that's a winning combination in my eyes. So You could even make a really boring subject, maybe give it a twist and make it funny. Do it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that before. I can't think of an example at the moment, but there are books that are normally quite boring, but they're written in such a way where you're just laughing about it. It's, they're funny books because
Right.
they write about them in a very sarcastic way, or so there's always something you can do differently. You can take a textbook and make it funny or make it
Right.
scary or whatever you have to do, but you have to make it different and unique. So, because otherwise Amazon is full of books, and I don't want to use the word saturated because I don't believe it is. It's just full of books.
Right.
and if you're adding another book, you have to make sure that it's something different, that it's,
Right.
something people want to buy, and it doesn't get buried under all the other ones.
Right. And that goes for both the interior as well as, the cover.
Yeah.
If it just blend, I mean, and this is why, not to go a little off topic, but this is why I always suggest people hire someone to do a book cover, is because, it's a little, um, very nuanced, where you want it to blend in, as in the point that you want it to look like it fits,
Yeah.
but you want it to stand out so people actually stop the scroll and actually click on it. And so it's a happy balance that you have to make. And even if you're you know, a designer, an illustrator, that doesn't mean that you can create, good book covers. It's a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
And so, so you want to just, like I was saying with doing your niche research, you want to check out, what kind of books are there, and make sure that you don't copy what's there. You can see what is consistent in the ones that are being purchased. And then, so you make sure that you stay with that consistency, but again, make yours stand out. I mean, there's reasons why, people that write, they take public domain stories, and they write updates to it, where it has their commentation to it, and people buy that, because again, it's adding their own individual, whether it's, comedy or sarcasm or whatever, or maybe it's deep knowledge, comparisons or whatever, again, people are still buying that, even though books have been around for, 100 years or 200 years, people are still buying this new version of Moby Dick or whatever, because it's, the cover looks good. It's not one of the boring covers. And the content, most importantly, is good, because while you can't necessarily tell the content when you're just scrolling, you kind of can when you look at the reviews.
Yeah.
If you see that it's overall a 2 stars, then you can infer from that the content's probably not that good.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you see that it's got, hundreds of reviews and it's like, 4.8, then the content must be good too.
Yeah.
And so again, so if there's a, a book that's in public domain that you're really passionate about, you love that story, that's another option. But again, it really goes back to what you know. And so, keep that in mind. And again, I think it really just comes down to try not to overthink it, and know that you're gonna make mistakes. Your first book is probably gonna be your worst, unless you happen to get lucky. But I mean, when I was talking about mimicking before, I mean, I actually have one of my first no content books that I created. I created out of necessity. It was something I was passionate about, something I needed. And years later, because I'd grown as a creator, I made a better version of it, a second edition, if you will. And my first edition, even though it was worse, the interior wasn't as good. There wasn't as much content in it as there is in the newer one, because it was out there longer and it's got reviews and everything else. It still outsells in my opinion, the better one. And so even mimicking yourself, like it runs into that same issue. And so really, like I said, and I mean, the covers are completely different as well. And so you really need to just, look at the other books in that niche and use them as inspiration, glean from them what you can, that can help you benefit and create a better book. It's what it really all comes down to, is
Yeah.
whatever type of book it is, no content, low content, written, it doesn't matter. It really comes down to creating a better book.
Mm.
And the best way to start is to stick with something that you know.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, this reminds me a little bit of when I first started. There was a planner that was very popular, and it had a very um, nice floral cover. And at the time, everybody was making those. I
Yeah.
think you must have come across it, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure you know which one I'm talking about, because everybody was making the same type of planners. And I think back in those days, it kind of worked a little bit because people were selling some copies of their own
Hmm.
planners. That wouldn't work now anymore. I
No.
don't think it would, because it's just so everybody's doing the same sort of thing,
Right.
copying it, and they're so similar. I don't even know how they got away with it because some
Yeah.
of them were almost identical.
Hmm.
And that is definitely something you shouldn't do, because I don't know. I mean, you can practice uploading books like that, but don't expect them to sell.
Right.
That's basically it. Yeah.
Right. And again, I mean, I'm all for practicing and getting
Mm.
familiar with the process, but just go in knowing that, like you said, that it's probably not going to sell that
Yeah,
well. Because
definitely.
what I see too much is people expecting too much when they don't put a lot of effort in, and and then they just quit and they say, oh, it's oversaturated and you
Yes.
can't do it. You absolutely can. You can,
Mm.
even today in 2024, you can still create a successful book publishing business. Um,
Mm.
and I think the greatest way to start, the one with the lowest barrier of entry, again, is to stick with what you know.
Yeah,
I think, getting back to the covers that you were talking about, the reason why those probably started selling before, was, or originally, was that before that, people were just doing plain black covers with white text,
true.
and so,
Yeah.
and that's why, a lot of times we say to, look at what's out there and see what
Mm.
people are used to, but don't be afraid to spice things up. Don't be afraid to shake things up and make something different, because
Mm.
that first person that created a floral, you know, uh, binder, or not binder, a floral
Planner.
journal,
Mhm.
or planner, compared to the black and white ones, that was a huge, contrast, and
Yeah.
that made, all the difference in the world, and that was, kudos for them for coming up with that idea.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everybody, once they see something successful, everybody wants to try to get a piece of that. But again, they copy it. And so, like I said, look at what's out there in your niche. The first thing is obviously figuring out what you're going to create,
Mm.
and I guess even before that is figure out what your niche is going to be,
Mm.
and then, are you going to create a no content book for low content, or are you going to create a written book? And then, like I said, go in and do the niche research and find out, again, what's selling, and you can use the BSR, the bestseller rank, to see
Yeah.
that. And then, what I also like, by doing that, by doing the niche research, even though you know the topic inside and out, by finding out what people are interested in, and what's working, what's not, you also, by looking at the BSR and looking at the competition, you can set your expectations as
Yeah.
to what you can expect as far as sales. Because some niches may not be saturated, or I hate using that word too, but they may not be set, they may not have a lot of competition, but if you don't have a lot of people looking for it, yeah, your book may still show up and still may be the number one. But if they only get, one sale a month, then, that's something that you want to know going in.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to get discouraged if you don't look at that aspect of it. If you,
Very true.
if you don't know what to expect. And the thing is Amazon doesn't tell us a lot of stuff,
Mm.
but with that BSR, that does tell us a lot. That tells us what we can expect. You know,
Mm.
if you look at, you go into the top 100 paid books in that particular niche and see what the BSR is for the first ranked and the 100th ranked, and that gives you an idea of what you can expect. You
Yeah.
know, obviously you're probably not going to jump in there at the number one spot, but if you know that the number 100 spot is still like 10,000 or lower, then it's going to be hard
Mm.
to be visible.
Mhm.
But at least as long as you know that, then I don't think you'll be as deterred because
Yeah.
going in, you're setting your expectations, appropriately. And then, okay, I know I'm not going to sell a lot, at first, but as long as I put out a good book, as long as I, put out good interior, good cover, and it's something I'm knowledgeable about, then, I might have to run some ads to get some visibility. But
Yeah.
the people that do buy it will love it. And then again, because this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm.
And so, it may take, months, years sometimes to get enough reviews and everything to get your book more visibility. But
Yeah.
it can happen as long as it's a good book.
Absolutely. I think you said something that to me was the most important thing, and that is that people overthink it. And I say that a lot to people: don't overthink what you're doing, because you would never do it if you're
Right.
anything. Because I've been in that situation where I thought about something so much that I never actually get started. And
Talk
it's
yourself out of
really,
it. Yeah.
exactly. And it's really more important to just get started and to do it.
Mhm.
You can always change it later. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You can adjust it, or you can make another better one. But you have to get started and not overthink it. And like we said, I mean, do what you know is all about: creating a book or writing a book about something that you have some knowledge about, because it's just better all round. And also you don't get bored with it
Right.
because I've made books and they don't sell very well. And that is because I was so bored making them because I made them thinking that they were popular. Thinking, when you do your niche research, you
Mhm.
you think, oh yes, there's a lot of demand, blah blah blah. I don't do my research that way anymore, because I rather make a book in a topic that I enjoy, and then I enjoy the process, and usually they sell better than the ones that I made because I thought the niche was good and I better make a book in that niche. And then it turned out that it wasn't selling anyway. And the whole reason I know that now is because I didn't make that book the best it could be, because I was bored with the niche.
Right.
I just didn't feel it.
Right.
And that is so important. So I think that the best combination is doing what you know, and then having a good niche where the demand is there. Competition to me is not so much of a problem, because if yours is better, then that's no competition. But the demand has to be there. That's true. Yeah.
Right. And Amazon makes it, people think that the Amazon makes it so hard for a new book to do well, and they really don't, because they
No.
have the new releases
Mhm.
categories. In almost every book
Yeah.
category, there's a new release section, which means if your book is a good book and
Hmm.
the first 30 days it's out there, it's going to get extra visibility.
Yes.
And so it's, if you put out a good book, and, people will find it,
Hmm.
but I agree with you that it really comes down to having a passion for it. If you
Yeah.
have a passion for it, it's going to show. It's going to show in the quality, and it's also, chances are it's probably going to be quicker to create,
Hmm.
whether it's written or not. It's going to be quicker to create because you're passionate about it, you're knowledgeable about it. You
Yeah.
don't run into the writer's blocks and all that other stuff that happen when you're creating things out of thin air.
Yeah.
Like as a writer, when I wrote my novel, you know, I was passionate about it. It was a topic I was passionate about, but I still ended up getting um, writer's block from time to time because I was still creating things,
Yeah.
fiction, and so, but if you're creating something that you're knowledgeable about, and it's no content, low content book, or even a written nonfiction book,
Hmm.
there's less chance of you hitting those roadblocks because you are passionate about, you are knowledgeable, you're not making things up,
Yeah.
you're just, you know, putting things together at that point.
Yeah. Absolutely. That just reminded me of when I wrote my book, which was about branding, and
Branding. Yeah.
I could have written for days. I had no problem in writing. It was just putting it in the right order,
Right.
because obviously you want to. I could write about that, for days on end without
Mhm.
interruption. That was the easy part. But then making it sound good for other people to read and for other people to then be able to follow that, that's a different thing. That's where teaching comes in, and how do you explain it in a way that it makes sense to people and that they can understand it when they're beginners. So
Right.
if I hadn't been passionate about it, I probably I wouldn't have written that book, because it would then be a chore. But if something isn't a chore, if something is pleasurable and you love to talk about it, and this is where your idea from earlier comes in. Ask your friends and family what you keep talking about, and they'll tell you. I think that was actually a really good tip. So they'll be able to tell you
My
what you keep
family
writing
my
about.
family and friends would be like, you talk about magic tricks a lot, you talk about board gaming a lot, you talk you talk
Yeah,
about puzzle books a lot, and yeah, and you talk about
yeah,
softball a lot, so those are things. Luckily, they're things that they've already told me numerous times, so I know I know what those aspects are.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's something that it's very easy to overthink.
absolutely.
And it's something that really what all boils down to is, again, what are you passionate about? And what you're passionate about usually is whatever you talk about the most.
Hmm.
Um, so, like for my mother-in-law, it might be bingo. She loves to play bingo, whatever. And
Hmm.
so then when you take that topic, then you can figure out, okay, what can I do with this now?
Yeah.
Maybe make a list of, 5 or 10 things that you're passionate about. What can I
Mhm.
do? Do I want to write a book, or do I want to create something no content, low content? And
Mhm.
then once you decide that, then you can, take it from there. But it really comes down to finding out, what what you are the most knowledgeable about, and what you have the most
Absolutely.
passion for.
Yeah. And that is definitely the secret
Yeah,
to
yeah,
selling books. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And again, I think it really just comes down to, not overthinking it. Just and again, it goes back to setting expectations, knowing that, you know, you're going to evolve as a creator, whether it's written or not. And so, whatever you create to begin with, you might be afraid that you're not going to make any sales. Well, I guarantee you will not make any sales if you don't put anything out. That's the only guarantee I can make you.
Mm.
If you don't put out a book, whether it's written or not, you will not make any sales selling
True.
books. It's that simple. And
It is.
so, it really, yeah, obviously it's an art to it. And so it's something that's gonna evolve, and the evolution is what I enjoy the most about it. The fact that I'm not creating the same types of books, and I'm not creating them in the same way that I did 8 years ago when I started.
Yeah.
If I did do it exactly the same and I hadn't evolved, I probably would have quit a long time ago, because there'd be no enjoyment in it. It's that evolution that makes it fun for me. And I think the moment I stop learning and getting better will be when I stop doing it, which luckily isn't anytime soon, because I'm nowhere near being perfect when it comes to it. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I think just, again, setting that expectations and knowing that you don't have to be perfect. We talked about this in a previous episode. Done is better than perfect. Obviously, you still want good quality, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
No.
And again, I think that the best way to start is to start with something that you know.
Absolutely. So you can start now by brainstorming ideas. That would be the easiest way to start.
Mhm.
And also to just take that first step, because once you've made that first step, the rest is a lot easier. I find that people stop themselves from ever
Right.
starting. That's basically what it is. But I would say to people, have a little think and see what you're passionate about, what do you talk about, ask your friends and family, and just brainstorm it and see
Right.
what you can come up with.
Yeah, I think you'd
And
be surprised with how many
yeah,
things you can come up with. Starting out, you're thinking, I'm not passionate about anything, or whatever. I mean, it could be being a parent. You know,
oh gosh,
it,
yes.
it could be something as simple as, I just absolutely love talking about my grandkids, or whatever. Whatever it is, again, and that these are things that you may not think about. That's why I find it so important to talk to others on their perceptions of you, and wording it in such a way where it's like, what are things that I like to talk about? What are things that, that that I'm interested in?
Mm.
And if you don't want to ask people, because a lot of times we're introverts. You don't want to ask somebody, text them, and just ask them, hey, what do you think are, 5 things that I talk about a lot, or 5 things that you think I'm passionate about. And then it's all in a text. You don't actually have to have, eye-to-eye contact or anything like that. So they don't have to feel like they're hurting your feelings or whatever. I mean, they don't have to be blatant. Just, I want topics. I don't want details. I just want topics, and I think you'll be surprised at how many you actually end up coming up with. I think the hardest part will honestly be deciding on which one to start with. And that's a good problem to have. That's a good problem to have, to be like, I've got so many ideas, I don't know where to start. And which may be a great idea for another topic to cover. But
I
yeah,
think so.
I mean, I've run into that issue many times, and that's, like I said, that's a great problem to have, and especially when it's all things that you're passionate about,
Yes.
and things that you enjoy. And then it's just a matter of, okay, now I'm going to go onto Amazon. I'm going to look at that niche and see what's selling, see what people are looking for, especially if you can't decide whether you want to do a written book or a no content, low content book. Then you can look and see, what people are looking for. And yeah, that's when the fun begins.
That is it. And that's how to find a niche.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another great mastermind, Nuria. Once again, a huge thank you to all our listeners and viewers who came to tag along. If you enjoyed today's mastermind, please consider following or subscribing to the podcast, and maybe even leave us a review and let us know what you thought. Until next week, I'm Keith Wheeler.
And I'm Nuria Corby.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mastermind today. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and tell a friend who would enjoy it too. Your support is greatly appreciated. This has been the Masterminding Success Podcast.